Good to see you back to the second part of my conversation with Hap Klopp, the face behind the North Face brand. We talk about mentorship, leadership, entrepreneurship, and a lot of stuff about the future and what the future may hold. So thanks for joining us.
People sense if you're being dishonest. They have a pretty good bullshit detector. And, if you try and fake it, it's there. And I'm thinking in particular, not necessarily the customers as much as the people working with you. And if you are afraid of doing something because of the risk, they're going to know that it's going to get translated to them.
What you mentioned earlier as well, we need to get a team together that kind of understands the DNA of the brand. And that really takes me to the question, yes, you sold the North Face, I think, back in 2000 to VF Corporation. They're listed on the NASDAQ, I think. Now, when you were really assembling what was, not only the basis, but quite far into what is now a $13 billion business, how did you affront leadership? What was the way what were the lessons you as a young entrepreneur yourself, you learned building your own company, trying to assemble the right team that really shares the vision, feels they have skin in the game?
Well, the first thing is that I don't believe people follow people. I think they follow visions. And I think it was Bill Gates, when he's asked what his job was at Microsoft, he said is to have the vision and to articulate it. And I predated that by a lot, but that was kind of what I was doing. In terms of hiring, we didn't hire people for business skills. Now it's a little harder to do that, but we were starting out entrepreneurial. What we were hiring for was a passion for the outdoors and a passion for changing the world. And what I knew is I had background. I had an MBA from Stanford. I'd run a company before this. While I was in school, I ran a family company. And what I knew was I could teach people business principles. But what I couldn't teach them was passion, commitment, and whatever. I frequently joke with people and say, there's one way and one way only to motivate people. And that is hire motivated people.
Exactly. Hire the passion, not the person.
Yeah. And then just get out of their way. So that was the idea of leadership. The idea was, of course, articulating your quantitative goals, but focusing an awful lot on qualitative goals. And then we used tools a lot of people didn't use. We were very measured in what we did. We every month we delegated a lot. People had specific goals that they were measured against, and then we would update and see if they did that. The more they performed, the more responsibility they got. As the company expanded, that was the case. It's harder when you're a billion-dollar company to not hire for specific skills. But the great thing about being an entrepreneur is that you can do that and you can create this entire thing. And that's where iconic brands come from. I think it's very, very hard to try to create a brand out of a billion-dollar company that's all new and whatever. Now, there's a lot of people who are graphics people and a lot of people in the science of branding who will tell you, oh, yes, we can create a great brand for you. I think it's hard to do. I think it's easy to do if you start with it that way and just don't vary over time. And if you look at it, the logo is the same logo that we had the first day that we started a product. I spent $250 hiring somebody to make that. He turned out to be very skilled. Dave Alcorn is his name. He ended up being the head of the graphic design for Merrill Lynch. So it gives you some idea of his capability. But he was just starting and we didn't have any money. So we did $250 of design. And then, of course, we registered and do all those other things. But the ideas don't change from that. Only one thing has changed ever since 1968 when we started it, and that is, in some cases, a rectangle is put around that. It's kind of a weird shape that doesn't graphically work all the time, like on the front of a store or what have you. So you will see it sometimes with red rectangle around it. but it's the same basic logo underneath.
Yeah. I mean, it's very memorable, that logo. Coming back what you were saying about, if you want motivated people, hire motivated people. A couple of weeks ago, I had Emma Isaacs on the show, author, amazing businesswoman. She's the owner of Business Chicks. Is a really, really interesting person. And I asked her about the same thing. How do you keep, especially now in these times where events are very difficult to organize, how do you keep people motivated? And she said, entrepreneurship, I'm an entrepreneur and I hire entrepreneurs. You don't need to have your own business in order to have that entrepreneurial approach, can-do approach, positive approach to whatever you are doing. If you believe, as you were saying earlier on, Hap, in the vision, then the traction with that entrepreneurial, let's say, momentum in that individual person really does take care of a lot of the development of the company.
Would totally agree. Entrepreneurism is not a stage of a business, it's a style. And it has to do with risk-taking and not being afraid of failure. It has to do with innovating on a regular basis. It has to do with things like design thinking, where you're doing rapid iterations, discarding anything that is not working, adapt to the new one to be able to deal with it.
Yeah, and you just mentioned failure. You just read my mind, because that was my question to you as a mentor, as a leader, as an entrepreneur. I don't know whether I find the quote. Yeah, you said a couple of things about failure, which I absolutely loved. Often wrong, never in doubt. I love that one, Hap. And the other one, business is a series of linked recoveries. Business is a series of linked recoveries that you later elegantly describe as a plan. I love that. Very, very true. So how do you deal with failure? How do you see failure?
Well, Edison had a great line. He said, I've never failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that something doesn't work. It's like, if you look at it, the scientific method that is used in science is one that says basically we hypothesize something, we test against it, we discard those things that don't work, and we pursue those that do. Somehow business, the idea is everything needs to be right. It isn't going to be right. If the speed of change of society is accelerating, it's exponential, it is not linear, and you don't have time for perfect information anymore. So what you have to do is actually embrace failure. And that isn't do things stupidly, and certainly you should read so you don't have to learn on your own, OPM, other people's money, learn on that, what they're doing. But what you have to do is not fear failure, because that will limit you. And I put oftentimes to Silicon Valley. I live not far from it, and we've always been immersed in that. I went to Stanford, which is in the heart of Silicon Valley. Berkeley is now included in that. But the mentality that exists is one where it's okay to fail. And as a result, and think about Steve Jobs, classic. He was kicked out of the company. They brought him back later on when he learned how to play well with others. But the essence was, it was okay to fail, if you will, in that word. As a result, so many people here can set really high goals, because if you don't worry about failure, then you can set those goals. If you're afraid of failure, what you do is make very modest incremental goals. You don't change anything. You don't revolutionize the world. You don't go out and pursue that because it is wrong. And so it is a way of thinking. So what you have to do is adapt to it, accept it, recognize, don't be foolish, as I said, test. Jeff Bezos, I think, is at Amazon, said, think big, start small. So what you do is test some idea. If it fails, the whole ship doesn't go down as a result of it. But once you see what it is, then you pursue that.
Yeah. And I love what you said. You have to embrace failure as a process potentially to success, because we are constantly evolving. We have to check what we are doing. And, it makes me think of one of my bosses back at CNBC. And I remember he swooned in and he kind of like analyzed the business and he came up with these great ideas. And the reason why his first line to us as a team stuck to my mind was it was the first time I saw a boss really embracing potential failure. Because what Jeremy back then said to us was, guys, I have an idea. Look, It can all go wrong. And if it does, that's fine. We'll just change it. But let's try this. And let's just see, does it work? Doesn't it work? And if it doesn't, let's move on. And I was like, oh my God. And I come from, a classical European kind of culture where it is bad to fail. If you have a hole in your CV and you can't really substantiate why 6 months between one job or the other, or why your business failed, then that is not good. Whereas, if you haven't failed, you haven't tried. That is the other mentality that I very quickly learned then, living and working in the more English American system. And I really, really love that approach to say, hey, failure needs to be embraced. And as long as you learn from it, that's, I think, the key, Hap, then it is a good thing because you know what to discard. So let me ask you a personal question there. So what is the issue, the failure you learned most from?
Oh, I think that's difficult. I think the failure, oftentimes small. I mean, start in the wilderness. I mean, when you're climbing, you can't not or stop because you may fail. What you have to do is protect against it. That's why climbers have ropes, with the exception of Alex Honnold and a few others who are doing unbelievable climbing with no protection whatsoever. Generally, what you do is protect against it, and that's what you do in society. So you do that. So I've learned to take risk, but protect against the most catastrophic thing you can do. One thing is, as I said, think big, start small. So what you're testing is against that. I think the other thing that you learn is that you don't always have all the best ideas. I didn't have the best financial strategy for North Face, so we constantly were growing, and we always had to refinance, which meant that I had to turn from being a mentor, an educator, a person who loved the outdoors, into an investment banker for my company. And that was wrong. And that was why I ultimately sold the company, because I was financing all the time, and I didn't like it. And it was bringing in people, even some people that didn't understand what our goal was and what we were trying to accomplish. And so I was spending all my time marshaling and shepherding all of the people that way. And so it wasn't there. So that, in essence, was a failure. It was a failure to do that. In all candor, at the billions of dollars they have in sales right now, I wouldn't be the best person to run it because I like change too much. I like innovation, and it's hard to do in a large company. I don't like meetings a whole lot, and you have to have a lot of meetings in a large company.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's it's I have that with my entrepreneurs as well, and the companies I'm invested in. It's interesting to see that at some point, the entrepreneur that is also the CEO at the beginning is not necessarily the right one to really take the business from one stage to a global stage, as to say. And a lot of these people are different to you, perhaps, and they don't want to recognize that, and they don't want to give their baby up, which might be the smart thing to do for the brand, for the company in the long run. Let me quickly interrupt the conversation to say thank you that you're here with me on the channel. If you do enjoy what I'm putting out, the in-depth kind of conversations, then why don't you subscribe and also hit the bell button so I can keep you informed with our newest releases. Thanks for that in advance, and let's get back to the conversation. But your sale, that was one of my questions, said, why did you sell in 2000 the company? And I have to say, for a fairly moderate price compared to what the company is worth now. And I wonder how, looking back, would you have done that differently? I'm not saying not selling at all, but still being actively, a part of the business.
I don't think so, because of what I said earlier. The way I'd evolved that whole company, it was ending up being something that I wasn't getting the feedback that I wanted. I'd rather go skiing or what have you.
Yeah.
And also,
it's values, as you said, huh?
Also, there was when I talked to you about having these, sort of 3 words that you live by. There are other ways to run businesses, and I'm well aware of it. Intellectually, I was aware of it, and I liked the idea of applying some of those others. But what I knew was you couldn't apply it to the North Face without destroying the North Face. So when I left that, and I do some consulting with small and large companies, I can bring these other ideas to the fore that are also interesting to me, but I didn't want to just play around with North Face because my own needs. to have more. So I think it was the right time to be able to do it, the right time for me, right time for the company.
Okay, it's an interesting one, and you're talking about I was becoming a finance guy, a managing stuff guy, rather than really being at the forefront of developing the products and really sticking true to my own values. Because there was a crisis to creation moment. I thought, when I read about it, how I thought it was amazing. Tell us the story when you were just out of a financing round. I think totally. Oh my God! Luckily, we've done this. Took your family skiing, and then all hell broke loose, I think, at your manufacturing site with some sort of storm, and you had to come back. Can you tell us that anecdote on how you really managed that crisis and really pulled things big time off?
Well, what happened was, as you mentioned, I'd worked all winter long and hadn't gone skiing because I was doing a financing for the company. We completed everything, and I headed to Vail with the family, and we were going to be skiing. And I got up in the morning, had a call. One of the people said, "Are you sitting down?" Which is usually not one. And I said, "Yeah, I am." Well, the roof fell in. And I said, "Were you talking about figuratively or literally?" Said, "No, literally. It fell in. We had a storm. The rain collected on the roof. It was so heavy that it cracked all of the beams over the factory. And so the entire factory was inundated. All of the computers were fried. So one, we can't get back in because the fire department won't let us get back in. We don't know where the orders are because the computers aren't working. And we don't know how we're going to get out there." So my first response was to go skiing that day because I hadn't gone skiing. I couldn't get back anyway, but then I went back, and the idea was quickly to put a team together to be able to overcome it, with the belief we were going to overcome it. We didn't know if the insurance company would pay us or not. We believed they would, but we couldn't wait for them to come up with an answer. We took one team. We went up to the University of California, which was nearby. And we had those people come down and work on the computers to see what they could do. We put another bank of people calling all the customers saying, we had a little bit of a problem, but we'll be back there. Would you send us a copy of the order confirmation we sent you so we can confirm what we're doing? And then at night, when nobody was around, we'd send teams of people in to be able to get the product out of the factory while we simultaneously were manufacturing elsewhere and working on orders to bring new materials in. But it was a belief we're going to get there, a belief that we needed a team to be able to accomplish it, and to recognize that it was just one more challenge.
Yeah, it definitely was a challenge. What I thought was amazing is exactly that you were having to be, I don't want to say economical with the truth, but just kind of iron over the entire crisis and say, okay, you're going to get your orders. Don't worry about it. Can you just remind us what the order actually was? Because perhaps half of the stuff was destroyed in the water or in that storm. I love that story. That was interesting. Now, Hap, to start concluding our conversation, amazing conversation, you being a mentor and looking back, what do you think? Does everybody have really the thing to not only be an entrepreneur, but really then to build an iconic brand like you did? And if not, what do you think are the main things you see in your mentees that are totally off or totally the right thing?
Well, I think most people have the capability of doing it. It's a size of the enterprise that they might be good with. There's also their life situation. If you're a single mother and you have a couple of kids and you're sending them to school and you've got to feed them at night, you may not have the time. You might have the intellect, you might have the energy, but you have to devote it somewhere else. So, and I use that as only one example. There's hundreds of examples, but so not everybody has the luxury of being able to accomplish that, but they do. I think the second thing is then do they have the luxury of being in an ecosystem that allows it to grow? Are you surrounding yourself with people that you can hire that will support you, that will provide the things that you don't have? And are you open to those ideas? All of the great ideas come in the valley between disciplines. And if you are open to bringing in a variety of people with different views, you'll come up with solutions that never existed there before. So yes, I think the capability is there. I would say that not everybody should pursue it because people have different appetite for risk. Entrepreneurship is risk. And so if you don't have that appetite, don't try to be something you aren't. As I said, be the company you are, be the DNA that you are. Or put that forward. Don't change, because people sense if you're being dishonest. They have a pretty good bullshit detector. And, if you try and fake it, it's there. And I'm thinking in particular, not necessarily the customers as much as the people working with you. And if you are afraid of doing something because of the risk, they're going to know that it's going to get translated to them.
Yeah, authenticity, such a key aspect. And what about self-doubt, Hap? I wonder, even the most enthusiastic and capable individual, really with a vision and even with the right team, goes through those moments where everything seems gray, they have their self-doubts, the negative thoughts going around in their head. How did you deal with those thoughts if you had them?
Well, I didn't have so many, but first thing I would say is remember, not all ideas will work out. So one of the things you need to do is say, okay, I've tried it, it doesn't work. And you have to make some pretty rigorous assessment against what you're doing to see if that's the case. I never had a doubt that I succeed. I wasn't sure exactly what it was going to be. We had to pivot over time. I mean, we started out with camping goods and we ended up in apparel. We ended up in places that I resisted going into because I didn't see how we would be unique, but the team was able to take me to that place. So, so I think self-doubt, you quoted something which I said, often wrong, never in doubt. That really was kind of my strategy.
I like that. If you embrace failure as something positive, then doubt goes like, okay, fine. I don't need to doubt myself, because if I fail, it's okay, and I know how not to do it going forward. I like that. So what would be the 3 key things you would really try to mentor on Mentor.TV to anybody that would like to go into business, build a business, and even just, have a successful life in general?
Well, I think the first one is be true to yourself. Know who you are and be true to that. And you don't need to vary from it. It's okay. It's good. The second thing is to listen to other people, listen to your market. If you're selling a product or a service, have great customer empathy. Don't just ask them what they want. Try to figure out what they want, because if you do that, then you're going to be a lot more efficient in getting there. And then the third thing that I would say is surround yourself with good people, because no one individually is capable of building a huge business on their own. They need some fabulous people around them. And those people will not always agree with you, and those people will not always have the same view. That's good. That's not bad.
That's absolutely good. I totally agree. If you're in an echo chamber, so where do you go? That's exactly the point. You need to have those different stakeholders, even coming with different talents and visions and diversity in general, to just give it a different spin to whatever you're trying to accomplish. I totally agree with that. So the future outlook, considering the COVID-19 crisis, Hap, also, the development in the fit tech or fitness industry, how do you see the next few years mapping out? What do you think? What are your visions there?
Well, I think we're going to have a lot of change, a lot of pivot, and that's good. We've been moving in the wrong way anyway, if you look at society, and we need something to accelerate the change. As I tell people, let's never let a great crisis go to waste.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. From crisis to creation, this is my motto. And I think the motto of the North Face is never stop exploring. Exactly. My motto is, stay curious. And this is what I think life is all about. If you live your life as if it was the first day of your life and you have open eyes, ears, listening, as you just mentioned, then you have a potential to really develop and your own evolution. So I think that is tremendously important for the future. And yes, changing things.
Right. I'm going to have to go because I actually got a note saying we have a board meeting. So Absolutely. You're right on time. I love it. More Swiss than the Swiss. Thank you so much for joining me here on Mentor.TV, Hap. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you also, dear Mentor.TV community, for having joined Hap and me for another conversation here, this time about sports, the fit tech industry, leadership, management, mentorship, and whatever. So thanks for being with us. Thank you, Patricia. Take care.